Hello everybody and welcome to my latest review. Now today, I just want to warn you before we get into everything, this is going to be a review filled with spoilers going right up to the final season. Today, we are going to be talking about one of my top 5 favorite series of all time. And when I say top 5, that is a huge thing to say. That is a big thing for me to say about a series. Hannibal is the latest TV series I have binged my way through. From the very first episode, I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy it. It's very flashy, it's got a lot of style, but after a while you realize it's simply one of the most incredibly well-directed series on TV to date. Some of the cinematography is simply beautiful, symbolic, it's meaningful. So we're going to be getting down to exactly some of the big reasons why I love this series so much. So, let's start off firstly with the characters. We have a selection of wonderfully fleshed out characters with brilliant motivation, with clever development, such interesting character development. If it looks like I'm melting on screen, I am. It's really muggy and humid in England at the minute, so I'll try and make that as least disgusting as possible. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please do leave it a like and subscribe if you want to help support me and my channel. Also have Patreon and Twitter links down in the description. So, we start off the series with our main FBI investigator, Will Graham, played by Hugh Dancy. Now, this character, it took me a few episodes to get into, but by the end of the 3 series, he is easily on par with Hannibal Lecter in how interesting of a character he is, and that's obviously saying something, isn't it? That's obviously saying something. Hugh Dancy also plays this role down to a T. This is a investigator who is on the spectrum, closer to something like Asperger's, not Asperger's, but Asperger's syndrome. He also has problems talking to people. He has problems with social anxiety. Now, the very core of this series is about psychology. It's about people's minds. It's about what motivates people. And it often ends in a lot of murder and violence, but in the most interesting ways possible. Then we have Dr. Hannibal Lecter, played by Mads Mikkelson. Oh, I love him. Oh, he's brilliant. And I'm sorry, you couldn't have picked a better character for this role. Ever since I saw him as the main villain in the latest Casino Royale film of the new James Bond series, I knew he was going to be brilliant in this kind of role. Now, this character is a billion times more interesting than Mr. Chiffre, or whatever his name was, in Casino Royale. He has many layers himself. By Series 3, you're still trying to work out exactly what's motivating him, exactly why he's doing the things he's doing, because he's not so much a sociopath and a psychopath. As we learn throughout the series, he is something that psychologists can't seem to put a name to, because it's not something they've ever discovered before. We know that he is a cannibal, and in the very first episode, it is revealed that he is up to no good. He's working close with the FBI, and Will Graham is instantly wondering whether if he is the one being profiled here, and as we learn later on, that is pretty much exactly what's going on. So Hannibal Lecter ends up being the therapist for Will Graham, because Will Graham gets so involved in these murder cases that he sort of gets sucked in too much each time. And then this brings us on to Jack Crawford, played by Lawrence Fishburne. This is probably the best role I've ever seen Lawrence Fishburne play. I haven't seen him often play a character with much emotion, and yes, he's a stern, hard, powerful guy in this series. He's the head of the I'm not sure what you'd call it, the psychological investigation unit of the FBI, and he runs what's called the Evil Minds Museum, and Will Graham isn't a fan of that name, because Will Graham's thing is that he over-empathizes. He empathizes with these serial killers so much that Jack Crawford is scared that he is as well sympathizing with them. So, Jack Crawford, a very stern character, but he plays it so goddamn well. And again, we're wondering, what is he up to? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? He's pushing Will to the edge, but is it just because he wants to save lives? And we can say the same about Will Graham's character. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he getting too close? Is he becoming too close of a friend with Hannibal Lecter? And he absolutely does. And as we learn by Series 3, there's no going back at that point. He has become so close with Hannibal Lecter that he will always be involved with him until he detaches himself fully from that character. Then we have some other characters. We have Dr. Alana Bloom, played by Caroline Davernus, who is an interesting character. We also have Dr. Bedelia Du Maurier, played by Gillian Anderson. Gillian Anderson's a fantastic actor. And she really comes out of her shell in Series 3. She's not so much present in the first 2 series. And I love... This is a series that doesn't drag on and go on for too far. It knows what it's doing. From Series 1 to Series 3, it is so well paced. So, I'll talk about the pacing. The first series is all about introducing each of the characters, and this is the start of their characters' development. We have Will Graham, who shoots someone on sight because Hannibal Lecter gives a tip-off to this serial killer that they're trying to track down, telling them that the FBI is on their way. This is the first time you think, you know it's a series about Hannibal, but he seems so nice and so proper and formal at the start, and with clever editing you work out that he is definitely eating people. So he tips off this serial killer, and this starts off the chain of events, because it is a well choreographed chain of events. It's not all over the place, it's not sloppy, it's tight and well executed. Now, in that first episode we also have Will Graham with his "this is my design" routine, where he gets into the mind of the serial killer and he maps out the scene, and he basically reenacts the scene in his mind to understand what the serial killer's motives are. And this is what draws him closer and closer into the mind of a serial killer. This ends up spiraling out of control. So in the first series, that chain of events is sparked off by Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Will Graham then ends up shooting this serial killer, but was too late. So one of the women, the wife of this serial killer, is now dead, and the daughter of this serial killer was nearly killed by getting her throat slit if it wasn't for Will Graham shooting him right at that final moment. And as the guy is dying on the floor, he says, "See?" as a question, and this is referring to Will Graham, foreshadowing, showing that Will Graham then understands what it's like to kill a person. Now, this serial killer was going around murdering people that looked like his daughter, and it was a very weird family thing. So, Series 1 is then all about Will Graham getting too close to the mind of a serial killer. Series 2 is about Will Graham finally going over the edge and ending up almost becoming a serial killer and becoming too close with Hannibal Lecter. And let me tell you, the final 2 episodes of Series 2 are phenomenal. Just phenomenal. I'm sorry, but they're some of the best TV episodes I've ever seen in my goddamn life. I've seen good finales, but nothing like this. This blows any other season finale I've ever seen out of the water. It's just so well done, and if you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, I suggest you watch this goddamn series right goddamn now. So, then in season at the end of Series 2, Hannibal Lecter is found out by the FBI and he has to go on the run. So, we then move on to Series 3. We find out through Series 2 that Will Graham has got too close. In Season 3, Hannibal Lecter is now half the way across the world in Florence, and he seemed to have created a life for himself there and has taken Gillian Anderson's character with him. So, that series is then all about the final events, the final chain of events, tracking down Hannibal Lecter and finally catching him. We also have a fantastic performance. My God, it is brilliant. This is coming from Michael Pitt. Michael Pitt is a brilliant actor. I really enjoy him. I loved him in Boardwalk Empire. I thought he was fantastic. So his character is a complete sociopath madman. And Mason Verger has a sister. And they have this back and forth thing going on. Sorry, I've just noticed there are 2 actors under Mason Verger. Is it no longer Michael Pitt? Maybe it's just Michael Pitt at first and then Joe Anderson, because the voice is very different for Michael Pitt. It's not a very Michael Pittish voice, but I don't know. Anyway. So, basically, Hannibal Lecter ends up tricking Michael Pitt's character, Mason Verger, into slicing his face off and feeding it to some pigs. But anyway, we're getting into little details of the plot, but I just wanted to explain the pacing and how good it is. Now, one thing that too many series misses out on is the score, the music. What is the music like in Hannibal? I will say it's one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a TV series, if not the best. It's probably the soundtrack I've thought about the most, other than maybe Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones soundtrack is very different. What sets apart a series like Hannibal and Luther is another crime drama, but obviously it's a very different type of series, but it tackles similar subjects, tracking down serial killers and that sort of thing, but it's in England. The music in that it's like stock action music you could find online for free, whereas with Hannibal, they've put so much thought into every last bit of music. There's a lot of different sort of sounds depending on which character you're with. There's a lot of sort of tribal drumming and percussion. When Will Graham goes into his mind to, understand these serial killers, there's this humming, buzzing, sort of trickling techno soundtrack in the background. And it's all fantastic. It's all so well done. If YouTube wasn't insane and ridiculous, I'd show you examples of all of this as we're going along, but I really can't do that, so you're just going to have to trust me that the music is phenomenal. When you have characters like Mason Verger, you have this really Eastern sort of soundtrack. It's very bizarre, distorted Eastern sounds. And there's no silly rubbish sound effects. There's no stupid jump scare noises. There's none of that kind of stuff, because it is a psychological horror as well as a crime drama. Now, let's get on to some of the cinematography. Once we get to season 2 and season 3, it's all about reflection. It's all about, without Hannibal, you can't have Will Graham. Without Batman, there's no Joker. That sort of thing. So Hannibal and Will Graham start blurring into the same person at a certain point in the series. And this episode reflects a lot upon that. And so does the cinematography as we go along with that. I'm going to have to find this scene, so give me just 1 second. So, in this scene, Jack Crawford is discussing with Will Graham whether when they find Hannibal, Will Graham will slip away with him. And Will Graham responds by saying, "A part of me will always want to." And when he says this, in the scene, there is a reflection of Will Graham. And the reflection is symbolic of that part of Will Graham that will always want to slip away with Hannibal Lecter, the bad part of him. Will Graham then moves on to explain how, of course, he would have found Hannibal Lecter here, because this is Hannibal's museum of ancient torture devices. And then Will Graham says, not because of the exhibit, because of the crowd it attracts. Now on screen I will show you where he is when he's saying this. He is behind one of these torture devices, which is like an Iron Maiden. It's a cage. I think this is symbolic perhaps of how with Will Graham and Hannibal, with Hannibal in Will Graham's life, he's always going to be caged and trapped, or something like that. I think it's a very interesting way of displaying this scene, and it also explained how Will Graham is absolutely part of the crowd that this kind of an exhibit would attract. Now, we move on to just a beautiful scene. This is all set up by Hannibal. Hannibal knows what's going to happen. He's planning this all ahead. And they meet under this painting because Will knows that's where he's going to be. And as they're sitting side by side, each of them, part of their face is battered and bruised. And for Will Graham, the left side of his face is battered and bruised, and for Hannibal, the right side of his face is battered and bruised. And the whole point of this scene is to explain their friendship. They haven't seen each other in a very long time. They're both reminiscing. They're both very happy to see each other. They then go on to explain how they are one in another, how their lives are beginning to blur, and about how they are almost like Siamese twins, about how they are conjoined. And I think the bloody faces facing each other is to explain this further. It's a visual representation of what he's explaining here. I love things like that. You know, TV, films, it's a visual medium, so you should express what these characters are going through a visual thing without plenty of ridiculously unnecessary exposition to explain every last detail. They give enough of an explanation in the dialogue and enough in what you're seeing. Now, this is where I'm going to be explaining my last point, which is the dialogue. The dialogue in this series is phenomenal. It's absolutely fantastically well written. It's clearly written by someone that knows a lot about psychology, and that's what really interests me, because I love psychology. I find it fascinating. My mum's a therapist. My brother studied psychology at university. I studied psychology at college for a little while anyway. So I was really hooked into this very quickly. And having Will Graham as someone with Asperger's and social anxiety disorder, I can very much relate to him. He plays this character so well. He's very twitchy, he's very sweaty, he doesn't look people in the eye because he explains very early on that he doesn't like eye contact, and he keeps up that portrayal of the character throughout each of the series. And for someone that doesn't deal with anxiety, that can be a hard thing to do. But for Hugh Dancy, he does it very well. The dialogue's perfection. It's absolutely brilliant. There is so much thought put into it. Oh, I have one more thing to talk about. The editing. The editing is above and beyond fantastic. I couldn't believe what I was seeing in some of these scenes. One scene in particular, you have Hannibal making love to Alana Bloom. Now, Will Graham has always been infatuated with Alana Bloom, and is perhaps jealous of this, so Will Graham is having sex with Margot Verger. But Will Graham is imagining Margot as Alana Bloom, and the editing is so clever because it's showing both of these scenes going on at the same time, and this is again a portrayal of how Hannibal and Will Graham are one in the same. It's brilliant. The editing is fantastic, and I could talk about it for days, but the real point of this video was me to just spill some of my thoughts about this series and just explain how much I love about it. I'm not going to talk about any of the negatives at the minute, because this is more of just a, hey, go and watch this series, here's what I love about it kind of video. So, if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like and subscribe if you want to help support me and my channel. Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to be reading the Hannibal Lecter books from Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs and all that. So I might be doing a review on the books at some point, but I may be doing a review of Red Dragon and The Silence of the Lambs, but none of the other Hannibal films, because I think they're all pretty bad. Anyway, a wonderful series. Check it out. It's brilliant. 10 out of 10, without a doubt. Thank you so much, guys. I will see you in the next one. Take care now.